Okay, 15th of June 2019. Yesterday I asked Noam in an email if he thought that a salmon migrating or a squirrel making a jump must have a concept of math, in its head somewhere. And he answered that the way they do that research, the best of which has been done with insects, who can do things far beyond what humans can do, especially with migratory patterns. No one can seem to begin to figure out how they're computing using merely like the moon and the sun and the time of day, which way to go. No one can seem to piece that together. He's said in other lectures. He said, so the way they do it is they investigate the mechanisms by which they're doing that. Now, if in that investigation, those scientists started positing and finding good results for mechanisms of a mathematical sort, then that would lend some evidence that they are using some kind of concept of math. He says, but so far it's looking like they're not. None of them makes such suppositions. And then reading his answer, I was able to answer my own question a little more, and that's what I wanted to share with you as I was thinking about it. And I was like, okay, does a mechanical adding machine have a concept of math? Well, no. I mean, it doesn't need the concept, it's just doing it. So you don't need the concept to do the math. So I feel bad that I didn't answer my own question better. I needed to bounce it off of Noam to think it through for myself. We are social creatures, and there are thinky mechanisms that only work in the social way. Even just knowing that I was writing to the real Noam made my question more interesting. I couldn't have phrased my question as interestingly as I feel like I did without knowing that there was a real Noam on the other end. And then hearing his answer spurred yet further, he's a good muse. So yeah, when you think about it, it's like, you can make a gear that like multiplies by 5. You just need, a gear with one peg on it sticking out and 5 normal teeth or something like that. Whatever, you can make a gear with 5 teeth and then another gear that activates that gear and makes it go all the way around, so that every time, whatever you can make something that multiplies by 5. Does that mean it has a concept of math? It doesn't. So whatever mechanisms, God knows how sophisticated and subtle and interesting these neurological mechanisms are of a squirrel that somehow does calculus, but doesn't, it doesn't need to do calculus. It just needs to get the result of having the same result that we get from having done calculus, or that Newton got from having done calculus, He also made an interesting answer. I asked him if he thought math was like a universal, or if aliens would have math, or if they would have some other math. Is our math just a chance convergence of our particular history and many possible maths? And he said there's some decent reasons to think that, I gotta tangentialize. I'll say it and then I'll tangentialize and then I'll say it again. There's some decent reasons to think that aliens would have at least arithmetic, that basic maths are indeed universal. And let me explain. So Noam is really good at thinking about and reading about the people who are really interested in the stuff that I happen to be the most interested in. I had no idea. I keep discovering how much Noam Chomsky has answered questions that I've wondered for some huge chunk of my life. And it kind of blows my mind because I already knew about him. It was bad enough when I was in college and somebody told me about how great he is, and I was like, that guy? Oh, that asshole that I'm forced to study in my linguistics classes? I hate that guy. He's such a dogmatist. He seemed in my experience like a prescriptivist, and it was like always trying to I don't know. I'm sure Noam is well aware of how the schooling system has used his information and twisted it into an authoritarian top-down, we know what's true, we'll tell you, you shut up, you learn it, you know, we talk, you listen, and he would hate it. I know he hates that. Though he is not very good at listening, that's for sure. You listen to interviews, even very sympathetic interviews where, you know, I mean, not that it should matter, you know, like those Stony Brook interviews. Okay, the guy's a moron, and he's fairly contrarian, you know, you can tell he's kind of anti-Chomsky a little bit. But still, it's like, why don't you let somebody else finish a sentence every once in a while? Like, there's just so much legitimacy to the claim, the observation that Noam's an asshole. It's really weird. Because of all people, you know, apparently he's such a sweetheart to everyone he likes. Ooh, I'm excited to rewatch What Face I Just Made, because that was a totally underage girl. Well, not biologically underage by any stretch. She was at least, you know, 15, 16, something like that. Definitely looking around and kind of like interested. But what I'm interested in is not whether or not it was appropriate. Well, somewhat interested in that, because the appropriate thing for older men like me to do with younger women like that is to let them check us out. And then, according to our stupid, super feminized culture, the appropriate thing is to be oblivious. Hell, if you were to talk to, if radical feminists were to be honest enough, I would think that they would actually say, they would never actually admit this, but if they were being radically honest in a way that they can't even be with themselves, but if they were, they would say something like, it's inappropriate for older men to be attractive to women under 18. So you just need to, you just better figure it out. You'd better not be attractive to her. I think that's actually what they would say. But to the extent that you are, I think you're not supposed to notice. You just have to be 100% oblivious to it. For me, it's more like, it just feels awkward to like try and be the girl to girls rather than let them be the girl and just be there and be chill and like just actually end up circling around full circle and doing what the new culture says I'm supposed to do, and just kind of like trying not to notice, trying to give space, and just kind of, it ends up giving them space to just kind of like, because they can tell anyway, you know, girls are sometimes attracted whether I am interested or not, and whether they're of age or not, and then end up sort of leaking signal, bleeding tells that I'm interested, whether I'm really trying to be totally disinterested or not. So it'll just end up with some subconscious glance or something like that, and then they often pick up on that, and then that makes them more interested, and there's this whole dynamic. It goes back and forth. But anyway, so I'm excited to rewatch What Face I was doing, because I was like, oh, hi, you know, and then I'm thinking back, I'm like, okay, she's like 15, you know, why don't I at least enjoy the possibility of maybe her doing that? Because that would make my day, you know? Not because I want to act on it, but because energetic exchange I find very fulfilling. And getting the roles right is really important. And I think a lot of the problem with, I'll get off this tangent, but I think a lot of the problem with feminism is that it's confusing everyone about these roles. You're not allowed to be a real man and just let little girls just check you out, you know, like now all of a sudden you're like looking for approval and submission to all women. And I think that ends up creating a lot of the exact problems that more and more of us are noticing and being disturbed by. Namely, you know, older men looking for like companionship or approval from younger women. Well, you know, you raise everybody to be a mama's boy and this is what you get. I mean, it's not that unpredictable. If you want independent, strong, you know, sort of fierce but protective men, you're gonna have to acknowledge some of the better aspects of chivalry. Like, if you want real men, you're gonna have to stop denigrating real men. If you want real men, you're gonna have to allow men to become real men. I don't know how else to say it. It's pretty straightforward, actually. And of course, real men don't beat women, and they don't abuse women, and they don't have to catcall because they're actually like chill and like, you know, the most interesting man in the universe kind of vibe. You know, James Bond was never catcalling. I mean, James Bond's a bad example because the old, you know, Sean Connery Bond and Sean Connery himself appear to be a little problematic, but if you're not completely clueless, you get what I mean. Anyway, yeah, so this is all tangential anyway. This is all just super optional stuff. That's why I'm forcing you to tolerate my politics in order to get it. Just like Noam in the book I'm reading, you know, where I'm not quite to the essay at the end yet where he does the responsibility of intellectuals or some other bullshit, you know. He's always infusing politics. Oh, I've got you interested in my science. Now let's make you tolerate some of my politics. Luckily, I don't mind. I love his politics for the most part. But anyway. Yeah, he's just really interested in these edge phenomena, which is technically a linguistics term, but also just a general term. Like, the phenomena at the edges, like, you know, is 2 + 2 4? You know, are numbers even real things? Like, okay, so here's my thing. This would take too long to explain, so I'm not going to write him and ask him. Besides, I'm really glad he wrote me back and answered my question because I was able to come up with a clear question. One of the realest questions I wonder about numbers that I don't know who else to ask because I don't know how to read the lit that he reads, that's why I read him, is something like, are numbers even real at all? They just seem so made up. Like 5, like in the real world, you never have 5 rocks, you know? Even a proton apparently is a little different from other protons. Only electrons are like exactly the same. That's why there's the one electron theory. Might all be one electron. They all have the exact same weight as far as we can tell. So I might be incorrect on this. I don't keep up on the latest lit. I just hear things from people who hear things from people who hear things from people who actually read the lit. So that's why I love reading Chomsky, is because it's only once removed. It's not like YouTube. It's not like Veritasium. You know, he doesn't read Turing's papers. You know, he just reports on people who report on people who synthesized people who actually read people who actually studied the scholarly research. Reading Chomsky, it's bam. Believe it or not, once removed is about as good as it generally gets, unless you personally are a scholar. You know? Anyway. You know, it's not like reading Malcolm Gladwell, right? He's a good synthesizer, but he's nowhere near that Chomsky level. First of all, because Gladwell's one of those people who seems to barely understand most of what they read. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, well, it's like those Stony Brook lectures, the Stony Brook conversations. Like, that professor is just such a perfect example of who Noam refers to as one of those people where you're a smart student and you're sitting there and you have to meet this person's approval and get them to like your ideas and give you a passing grade, and yet you know they couldn't teach their way out of a paper bag. Like, this guy clearly just doesn't understand any of the things he's talking about. It's kind of fascinating. Like, he doesn't understand that he doesn't understand either. So he just doesn't remotely get that he's just aping things. Like, he can memorize things and then say them, but there's almost no comprehension. You know, it certainly is never like sinking in on that deeper level where he's really getting it in human terms. Anyway, it's our whole culture though. That's what you're supposed to do. You know, it's all supposed to be Goodwill Hunting. It's all supposed to be, you know, the guy in the bar who's aping the lines, and then Goodwill, you know, and Will comes and shows him up because Will, it's really weird to be someone who actually gets this stuff. I mean, trust me, it's really weird. Like, people hate it. Like, if I could give people some treatise on something where I'm just regurgitating and I'm using all the formal language, people don't take it too personally. They can tell, you know, they know what's going on, they see you, and they're like, okay, you're entertaining me, thank you. You know, you do it charmingly, you're a party favor. You just come up to someone and you just say, you know, actually science isn't very real. Science isn't a scientific category. There is no scientific method. There's just a set of methods. There's this Galilean style you'll read about if you check this book out. If you do check this book out, just plow through all the boring stuff where he gets too technical with the linguistics. The rest is incredibly interesting and truly is general. Anyone could get it. Anyone can read about the Galilean style and learn what that is. But but you'll never know what it is because it's not a thing, you know. These aren't things that are things. It's not a proton. It's just matter, you know. What is matter? Well, it's certainly not a scientific category anymore. It hasn't been since the 30s, probably even before that. Really hasn't been since Newton, but you'd have to read Chomsky to get why, or watch his Newton lecture on YouTube, something about the ghost in the machine. Anyway, these edge phenomena, you know, Chomsky's really interested in these questions. I want to know if a number is even real. Like 5, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the integers, it's just so arbitrary. Like there's never really 5 of anything. You never have 5 identical rocks, maybe 5 identical protons or electrons. But even protons, it wouldn't be 5 identical ones, it'd be 5 slightly different ones. So if you take 5 protons and you add 5 more protons, you don't have 10 protons. Because if you take 5 slightly underweight protons and you add 5 more slightly underweight protons, you're going to end up with 9.5 protons. You see what I'm saying? Or something that's the rough equivalent of 9.5 protons. I mean, it is discrete, so I guess you have to have, you know, either 9 or 10 protons. You can't have half a proton. I don't know. Can you? And besides, this is all real world stuff. The point is, do the numbers correlate to anything in the real world? Well, it seems to me even basic integers don't, because, I don't know, the real world is never discrete. But maybe it is. So this all goes back to like Gödel and computability and Turing and, you know, basic number theory. And I mean, I could go take a course just to answer this one stupid question, or I could find someone who actually understands it, spend 2 seconds explaining it to me, but I don't know how to find that person. So, I talk to you.